Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel Physiology Learning. I am Dr. Ram. Today we are going to discuss an interesting topic, that is regulation of respiration. In that, this video will be the discussion of neural regulation of respiration. So let's get into the topic. Now in today's learning objectives, that is the subtopics that we are going to see is introduction to the regulation of respiration, then types of neural regulation of respiration, then centers of involuntary control of neural regulation, then finally the lesions at various levels and their effect on respiration. This last topic has been continuously asked in various MCQs. The examiners never get tired of asking this lesions at various levels in many MCQs. So this is going to be a valuable part where we are going to concentrate more. Coming into the topic, first coming to the regulation of respiration. Let's try to understand, as all of us know, respiration is a two process. One is inspiration, another one is expiration. So this process of respiration is mostly under neural control. That is, the normal generation of respiration is done by the neural control. But at the same time, whenever there is any metabolic changes, then if there is any chemical changes in the body, there is an increase in CO2 or an increase in H plus or a decrease in PO2, then there is some control called as chemical control of respiration. Then there are other reflexes which are involved in respiratory control. They are called as non-chemical control. So in our first discussion, the most important part is the neural control, which is taking care of most of the part of the respiration. So let's get into the neural control. The neural control is mostly involuntary, because do any of us think to breathe day in and day out? No. But if I ask you to stop your breath for some time or take a deep breath and do fast respiration, can you do it? Yes, you can do it. It means that respiration, it's maximally controlled by the involuntary method, but it can be controlled voluntarily also. This voluntary form of respiration is helpful in some cases, and at the same time it helps us to do some things like breath holding and hyperventilation also. So this voluntary control of respiration is a short one, we will discuss it right away. The voluntary control of respiration comes directly from our cerebral cortex. So from the cerebral cortex, it sends its neurons to the respiratory centers and down to the respiratory muscles via the tract, our famous tract, that is our corticospinal tract. And finally to the respiratory neurons, and then to the respiratory muscles, that is our diaphragm and other accessory muscles, respiratory muscles. So this is how this voluntary control is happening via the cerebral cortex. There is an interesting disease in which only the voluntary control of respiration is present. That disease is called as, it is named after a curse, that is Ondines curse. This disease is named after a Greek mythology. In Ondine's curse, Ondine is a water nymph which lives in the water, and she would have come to the land and met a king, and they would have loved each other and promised and married each other. Then when the water nymph leaves to the sea, she would take a promise from the king that the king will not marry any other woman. But when the water nymph leaves to the sea, what the king does is, after some years, he gets married to another woman. So the father of the water nymph gets really very angry. He gives a very severe curse, which no one should get it, but still he has made a mistake. So the nymph's father gives him a severe curse that his involuntary respiration will be damaged, like it will be non-functional. So what is happening here? Here this king is having only voluntary respiration. So any person with this disease will have only voluntary respiration intact. What is the problem with only voluntary respiration intact? The problem is very obvious. When we go to sleep, we cannot breathe voluntarily, and obviously we have to die. So this king tries to stay awake and breathe voluntarily for a long period, but because of sheer exhaustion, he goes to sleep at some point of time, then finally he dies. So that is a clinical disease where only the voluntary respiration is intact and the involuntary respiration is gone. So involuntary is not functional in this person. Now coming to the most important control in neural regulation itself, that is the involuntary control of respiration. There are few changes in recent days about the respiratory control centers. I will update them in a separate class, but in this class we are going to discuss the classical respiratory centers and their classical functions. So coming to the involuntary control of respiration, it happens in the brainstem region. Especially the centers in the medulla and the pons takes control of this kind of respiration. This medullary part is the one which controls the generation of respiration. So I would like to name it as the generator. Let's consider this person as the generator. Now coming to the pons. Pons, what is the function of pons? If you ask me, I will tell it in simple terms that it is a fine tuner. Somebody is generating and this pons is like a fine tuner which can tune the respiration. So this is our fine tuner. First, let's discuss about the respective centers in medulla and pons. Medulla is the primary center, which is the generator. It has two groups of neurons. One is the VRG, that is the ventral respiratory group of neurons. Ventral respiratory group of neurons. And the other one is DRG, that is dorsal respiratory group, that is dorsal respiratory group. So ventral respiratory group and dorsal respiratory group. And there are two more centers in the pons, which is one is named as apneustic center. Apneustic center. The other one is called as pneumotaxic center. The other one, which is in the upper pons, is pneumotaxic center. Now this diagram we will be seeing it very repeatedly because these are the centers. We are going to discuss what is their function and what happens if these centers are damaged. So let's get into their functions first. Now coming to the medullary centers, which are very essential, which are very important. Among that DRG, that is the dorsal respiratory group of neurons. These are the ones which receive the sensory inputs from various other respiratory regions in the body. So they receive the sensory inputs. That's why it's called sensory integration center for respiration. Various inputs come to this region and relay their information. It is very closely located to nucleus tractus solitarius. This nucleus will be studying again in various places. This is called as nucleus tractus solitarius. So that is a place where many of the neurons come and relay there. Then what is the primary function of this DRG? The primary function of this DRG is inspiration. It helps the person to breathe in. Now coming to the VRG. This VRG, what is the primary function of this VRG is, it is involved in both inspiration as well as expiration. But does it work normally all the time? No. It usually works whenever there is a forceful breathing, like whenever the person is exercising or doing some heavy work, then only the VRG comes to the play. Normally it does not come to play, and all of us know that expiration is a passive process. But whenever it is done forcefully, VRG helps. It is made up of several group of nuclei. Then there is one more center which is favorite of all the examiners, which is called as pre-botzinger complex. What is this pre-botzinger complex? This pre-botzinger complex is like an SA node of the heart. So now you got the answer. What does the pre-botzinger complex do? Yeah, it is the pacemaker of respiration. This is very closely associated with VRG. This we will see it in our newer updates. Here, this is the pre-botzinger complex is the one which generates the respiratory rhythm. And there is an interesting story about pre-botzinger complex. Coming to this name Botzinger, how many of you think it is the name of the scientist? Yeah, most of us will think that it is the name of the scientist. But this Botzinger is nothing but a white wine. It is nothing but a white wine. It is like a champagne which is used in the parties. Then why have they named this for the nucleus? Because when these scientists identified this center and they found out that it is generating the respiration, but they were not able to name it. They haven't named it. So whenever they were presenting this paper, there was a Botzinger white wine bottle lying in front of the scientist who discovered it, and he named the center as pre-botzinger only. So that is an interesting story about this pre-botzinger complex, and the examiners never get bored of this complex and they keep on asking MCQ, that is, which is the pacemaker of respiration or which one generates the respiratory rhythm. That is our pre-botzinger complex. So make sure that you don't forget this Botzinger white wine. Now coming to the Pontine centers. Once we have two centers, one is the apneustic center, another one is our pneumotaxic center. What is the function of this apneustic center? This apneustic center is located in the lower pons. This apneustic center has a reason behind its name, because its function is to increase the inspiration. So it increases the firing of inspiratory neurons. And what it does is, if there is no person to control this apneustic center, what it will do is, it will make us inspire. So what will happen? If you keep on inspiring, is it good or bad? Obviously it is bad. Then it will cause respiratory arrest and the person will go for breathlessness, like complete stoppage of breathing. So this apneustic center, whenever it is stimulated and if there is nobody to inhibit, it will cause apneusis, which is resulting in inspiratory spasms. So that's why they have named this center as apneustic center. So it cannot go on like that. So there should be somebody to control this, and obviously the neuron which is nearby can easily control it. That is our pneumotaxic center. So it is located in the upper pons. The pneumotaxic center is located in the upper pons, and its function is to limit the inspiration caused by apneustic center. So what it does is, it will tell its friend buddy, whenever it is time, please stop inspiration. Now the person has to do expiration. So this pneumotaxic center is the one which switches from inspiration to expiration. So he is controlling the apneustic center to tell him to do expiration. Suppose if apneustic center is doing this, then he will tell him to start the expiration. Then there is one more added control for the apneustic center. This apneustic center is very naughty, so many people have to control him. The another one which is controlling him is the afference from the vagus. That is the vagus which is innervating the respiratory muscles. Whenever there is an expansion, whenever this expansion reaches its limit, it will tell the apneustic center to stop the inspiration and cause further expiration. So remember, apneustic center is under how many control? It is under two control. The first is the pneumotaxic center and second one is vagus. Both of them are very essential to cause a normal respiratory pattern. Otherwise what will happen is, apneustic center will take an upper hand and their respiration will be a little deep, like height of inspiration will increase. Now with this knowledge, we are going to discuss what happens whenever there is lesion in different levels of the respiratory system, that is the respiratory centers. Now we have known the functions and we are studying the lesions, but previously scientists used to cut the lesions, that is they used to make the lesions, and whichever function is happening, they used to correlate with their original function. But since we know the function, it is easier for us to know what will happen if they are cut at various levels. So what we are going to do is, we are going to cut at several levels, especially 4 different levels, and see what happens to the respiration. And in that also we are going to see what happens whenever there is a vagal supply is there, that is vagal impulses from the afferent is going to the brain and vagal is cut. If this vagal is also cut, what will happen at various different levels of lesion? Now let's start with an easiest one, that is whenever I put a cut here, the lowermost region, what is that cut? This cut is below medulla. So what is the site of lesion? It is below medulla. So what will happen to the respiration? The answer is pretty simple. Can any respiratory neurons come out of their centers? No, none of them will come. So what will happen to the respiration? Whether vaga is intact or not, that doesn't matter, because none of the respiratory neurons are able to come out of their respiratory centers. So what will happen? Yes, the answer is very right. The respiration ceases. The person's respiration ceases in both the cases. I am writing it together that it ceases in both the cases. Whether vaga is intact or vaga is not intact, that doesn't matter. The respiration is going to cease. Now coming to another easiest lesion, which is above pons. Let's take, there is a lesion above pons. So this is our lesion which is above pons. So this was our first lesion, and now we are trying to make a lesion above pons. So whenever the lesion is above pons, like everything is intact, let's take out this lesion. Do you think anything will happen to the respiratory tract? No, respiratory centers, all of them are intact. So what will happen is, it is pretty simple. The respiration is going to be normal whenever the vaga is intact. But what happens when the vaga is cut? What vaga was doing to the apneustic center? So let's revise again. In apneustic center, it is controlled by the pneumotaxic center as well as the vaga. Now I am saying this vaga is cut. So can it stop the apneustic center? No. But is there any other person who is stopping it? Yes, that is the pneumotaxic center. But I told you both are needed to give a smooth inspiration. So only one control is available now, that is our pneumotaxic center. So what will happen is, the person's inspiration will be slow and deep. He will have a slow and deep inspiration, because now the apneustic center is controlled by only one person, that is the pneumotaxic center. So this is our normal respiration because all the neurons are intact. When vaga is cut, it will be slow and deep. Now there are only two more lesions left for us to study. We will study the next easiest lesion, that is in between the pons and medulla. That will be our third lesion, that is pontomedullary junction. This lesion is called as pontomedullary junction lesion because it is in between the pons and medulla. Now all the centers, both the apneustic center as well as the pneumostatic center of the pons is completely cut off. What is the function of whole pons? If you remember, I told you it is a fine tuner. Now the fine tuning is gone. So what will happen? It will give us an irregular respiration. There will be no regularity because my fine tuner is gone now. So whether the vaga is intact or not, that doesn't matter because the pons is completely taken out of the picture, and vaga, if it is cut or intact, it is going to the pneumotaxic center which is already cut from our picture. So both the cases it will be irregular. Now we are left with only one more lesion which is in between the pons, like the upper pons and the lower pons. That comes here in between the pneumotaxic and apneustic center. Let's see what happens. This is mid-pontine lesion, mid-pontine lesion. Now we know that whenever mid-pontine lesion is done, whenever the vagus is intact, we know two persons are controlling the apneustic center. Now one control will be lost. Which control will be lost? When the vaga is intact, one control is lost. That is the pneumotaxic control is lost. Only the vagus is able to stop the apneustic center. That is the inspiration part of the apneustic center. Can it do it completely without the help of pneumotaxic center? The answer is no. But still it will be able to do it. So the respiration will be slow and deep. So compare these two places. These two places look exactly alike. What is the only difference? Here vaga is cut, here pneumotaxic center is cut. So here also it will be slow and deep. Now coming to the last condition, that is the pneumotaxic center is cut and the vaga is also cut. So what will happen? Can anybody stop apneustic center? No. So what will he do? He will keep on inspiring and causing the inspiratory spasm which is called as apneusis. So this area will have apneustic. So this will be our apneustic. So please read this chart again and again. It is definitely going to be asked in any one of your exams in the near future. So let's revise a bit one more time. So whenever I put a lesion just below all the centers, what will happen? None of the neurons can come out. So the respiration is going to cease whether vagus is intact or not intact. Then when you put the lesion above pons, all the neurons are fine. So the respiration will be normal. When vagus is cut, now coming to this condition, when vagus is cut, what will happen? The respiration will be slow and deep because only the pneumotaxic center is controlling the apneustic center. Now coming to the third lesion, that is our pontomedullary junction. The fine tuner is taken out, so the respiration will be irregular. Respiration is going to be irregular. Now coming to the last lesion, which is a mid-pontine lesion. Whenever the vagus is intact, it is going to be slow and deep, just like this picture. And whenever vagus is cut, as well as the pneumotaxic center and apneustic center is cut, it is going to produce apneustic. So it's pretty simple when you revise in this order. So make sure that you revise it multiple times so that you don't make a mistake in this simple one graph chart. Okay. Now coming to the take home points. What we saw today, the regulation of respiration is under three control, that is neural control, chemical control and non-chemical control. Today we discussed about neural control, which is further divided into voluntary and involuntary. Voluntary is from our cerebral cortex. If only voluntary is there, it will lead on to Ondines curse. Then DRG, what is its predominant function? Its predominant function is to control the inspiration. Then VRG, it can do inspiration and expiration both, but whenever there is a requirement or forcefully it is done. It is especially helping the forceful expiration part. Then coming to the third group of nuclei, that is the pre-botzinger complex. It is considered as the pacemaker of respiration because it can generate its own rhythm. Then finally the apneustic center, which helps in firing of the inspiratory neurons. The pneumotaxic center is the one which switches from inspiration to expiration by controlling the apneustic center. Thank you for listening. In the next video, we will be discussing about the chemical control of respiration. If you like this video, you can share it to your friends. Thank you so much.